What happens when you want to build a sleeper PC but you have the budget of a boiled potato? You get me a few months ago with a dream to build the best sleeper PC I could with an extremely low budget. Now I know what you might be thinking. Everybody does a sleeper PC these days. What'll make yours so special? Well, mine's going to be in a case that nobody will even be able to tell is capable of holding a sleeper build. I chose an old Dell Inspiron PC as my sacrificial unit to stuff all new hardware into. If you're curious what made me choose this of all cases, here's a rough approximation of how it went. Not this one, I've got bigger plans for this. Not this one, it's too new. This one. Perfect. At a quick glance, this does look pretty similar to what you'll see the average tech tuber use for an ultra budget system, but this unit is much older than the Optiplexes or HP workstations they tend to use. This thing is so old, it has a sticker for Windows 7 and shipped with a Core 2 Duo CPU. Nobody would suspect a case like this would have anything more than a crappy Celeron or Pentium in it. Truly a symbol of a bygone era. Now to pick the parts I'll be gutting this system for. The first thing I had access to, of all things, was the motherboard. I had this spare Asus Prime H560MA motherboard from some trade a while ago that I never got to throw into a system. It'll be perfect for this build since the biggest size board it can fit is micro ATX, and it'll give us plenty of access to modern Intel processors that are easy to find on the used market. Next, I went ahead and searched for a suitable CPU to throw in this thing. Originally, I had picked out an i7 11700K to throw in this build, but it got mixed up somewhere along the line while I was waiting for the delivery and it ended up back at the original seller. Not a good sign. Since the universe seemed against that pick, I chose a refurbished i5 11600K instead. It ended up being a decent price as well, as I only paid $150 for it. Not bad for a modern 6-core with overclocking potential. And just to be on the safe side with cooling, I grabbed a low-ish profile Noctua cooler to make sure the CPU had no chance to rival the surface of the sun. Next, I needed to do some research for what power supply to choose. As it turns out, this case only supports the TFX form factor, so I can't just grab some cheap Thermaltake power supply for this one. At first, I was going to pick a 500 watt Silverstone TFX unit, but those go for near $200 on Amazon, and I don't have that kind of money right now. Instead, I impulsively grabbed a 300 watt unit on a visit to my local micro center for about $100. Still not a great deal for just 300 watts, but paying for the quality of Silverstone is worth it. Lastly, we need a GPU to throw into the mix. I would consider my GTX 970 for this system, since it might pair well with that i5, but the case is low profile, so unless I somehow make a custom sideways mounting bracket and invest in a riser cable, that's out of the question. The first thing that comes to mind is the all-powerful GT 1030, and I do have a spare one laying around, but I think I might die if I throw that in a system I'm calling Ultimate, even ironically. Instead, I got a bit lucky and snagged up an open box RTX 3050 for around $140, a considerable discount when the nearest equivalent is $200 or more brand new. And while I was at Micro Center, I also scooped up a 32GB kit of DDR4 Corsair RAM for about $55 on a sale, an 80mm Be Quiet fan to replace the old loud exhaust, and a 1TB inland NVMe SSD to round out the components. Adding up all the prices, I ended up spending under $600 for all the parts, although that doesn't account for the motherboard or case since I really didn't pay anything for them. While the parts don't seem all that impressive on the spec sheet, managing to put together a build of this quality for that low of a price isn't half bad. Now for my favorite part, getting in a Discord call with a bunch of my friends and streaming myself building the whole thing.
I have something similar to that sitting in the shed somewhere.
It's an old Dell Inspiron. Holy! But I'm basically stripping this PC and putting a brand new one in.
Stripping?
Okay.
Hey, yo.
You know what I said! I want to see the processor in this bad boy. It's got an Intel Pentium dual core E5300.
I don't even know what any of that means.
My compact laptop still works. My classmates made fun of me because the only way to use it on the internet anymore was to get Opera 36 on it.
Intel, all my homies hate Intel.
Valid. You are valid. You are heard. Why does it gotta line up? Why can't it line down? Racist ass son of...
What? God, I fucking love cables.
I thought you was gonna say kids and I got scared.
Y'all ready for the thermal goop?
Did you just say?
The thermal goop. What do you think I said?
thermal goop does not sound like a real word. Yeah, I'm gonna put this thermal goop all over your face.
Hey, yo, it's just working. Y'all ready for the cool part of this build? I like my
Don't use
graphics
it.
card.
Oh, it's hot.
The RTX 3050.
I feel like your ADHD has taken over at this point.
This graphics card won't go in. Look at this beautiful machine.
Plugs it in and explodes immediately.
Oh, it will for sure. This thing is like sketchy as
Dude,
About an hour later, I had the whole thing together, and damn does this build look good. I'm feeling really good about this build. All it needs now is a Windows install, and I knew it couldn't have been that easy. Windows 11 continues to be the bane of my existence as Secure Boot fails to work on this motherboard, so it won't install in the system. I could have avoided all of this by producing the install drive with Rufus to bypass all of that, but I didn't have Rufus until literally the day before I wrote this script, so I stubbornly installed Windows 10 instead, affectionately naming this new system the Microwave. Now that we have everything running, how do the benchmarks look? Starting on Fortnite, the system ran surprisingly well at 1080p using performance graphics with epic view distance. It reached over 200 FPS during a no-build OG solo game, although the 1% lows dipped extremely low due to some stuttering that kept popping up throughout the match. I've heard occasional lag spikes can pop up like this, but they were so few and far between and it mellowed out enough by the end of the test, I'm more than happy with these results. I loaded up BeamNG Drive next since it'll be a good test of CPU and GPU performance running at the same time. Driving through West Coast USA on a set path through the city and the suburbs ending at the racetrack, we hit just under 60 FPS average on the normal preset at 1080p. BeamNG has plenty of graphical options you can turn down if you want it to run well over 60 FPS, and this is a much more intensive scenario than might commonly occur since I had traffic enabled, but even at the basic settings, it has more than enough horsepower to run reliably and cause live leak level car crashes. GTA 5 Enhanced Edition is up next, being still one of the most popular games you can get right now with its online multiplayer that'll make you want to rage quit after being hit by flying bikes for the 1000th time in 3 minutes. Running at 1080p high plus RT, this system hit 86 FPS average with 1% lows barely below 60. If it wasn't for the game wanting more VRAM, I probably could have bumped up the settings even more. Black Ops 6, despite the billions of issues with modern COD titles, is still extremely popular. The RTX 3050 in this system is more than up for the challenge as it pushes 109 FPS at 1080p basic settings. On my main system, I run extreme settings under 100 FPS, so I was thinking the game would either run like crap or look like crap. But I was pleasantly surprised at how good the basic settings actually are. As long as you aren't nitpicky about exact graphical details, this is more than enough. I threw Star Wars Jedi Survivor on here as the fill-in spot for your average AAA single-player experience, and I was disappointed as I always seem to be with this title's performance. Running 1080p low settings, it only averaged 42 FPS. I'm hoping other single-player titles aren't nearly as demanding on this, but if they are, this would be the one game genre I'd avoid for this system. Counter-Strike 2 is another popular title and turned out to be one of the best performing titles for this system. Running 1080p high settings, it reached 128 FPS average, more than acceptable for tryhard op sweats thinking more frames equals plus 10 reaction time. There's also plenty of room in the settings to bump a few things up if you don't care what frame rate you get as long as it looks good and runs decent. Lastly, I put the system through a test of F124, running my usual test of a single rainy lap around Monte Carlo. The system hit 75 FPS average and a minimum just under 60 on high settings 1080p. If you're looking to do a bit of racing on a system like this, it'll handle just about anything you throw at it. Not a bad showing for the hardware in here and how much I paid for it. Hear me out though, I didn't just build this system for no reason. I decided this system would be perfect as a media center system for my living room. That means it'll be hooked up to a 4K TV at all times. I don't know about you, but I don't think this will go too well. But you only live once, so I'm gonna run some more benchmarks for this thing at 1440p and 4K. Running Fortnite once again, I kept the same performance settings but bumped up the resolution. 1440p hit just about the same as 1080p, although the lag spikes finally went away. 4K ran an impressive 137 FPS average and 86 FPS 1% low. If you, for some reason, paired the system up with a 4K 120Hz monitor, it'd actually be a perfect pairing at these settings. Although if you have the money for a 4K 120 monitor, I'd be wondering why you're copying this system of all things. BeamNG scaled pretty well too, hitting 51 FPS average at 1440p and 28 FPS at 4K. It didn't feel particularly good playing at those resolutions, even with a controller, but if you're really dedicated to playing above 1080p, it's capable of showing those car crashes in high detail. GTA 5 wouldn't actually let me keep the same settings as before if I bumped up the resolution, so I had to turn down the presets a bit. At 1440p on high settings, the system managed 66 FPS average, perfectly playable for the average gamer. 4K doesn't scale quite as nicely though, even being forced to run minimum settings. 48 FPS is all the system could muster, probably playable enough on a controller, but I would recommend scaling back or even using a touch of DLSS. Black Ops 6 was still playable at 1440p on a controller, hitting 42 FPS average. I don't think the developers accounted for someone like me trying to use a card like this for 4K though, as it chugs along at 22 FPS. Even on a controller, this is unplayable. Just for fun, I did a bit more experimenting to see if you could even make the game playable at 4K with this system, and funnily enough, you actually can. Keeping the game at 4K, but adjusting the settings to minimum and running performance DLSS results in 60 FPS gameplay. But I'll let you be the judge if you're willing to sacrifice graphical fidelity for improved resolution. Jedi Survivor, it fell apart. Maybe if you're playing in a theater it's appropriate to play at 1440p, but it still wouldn't feel good in the slightest. It gets even worse at 4K, not even breaking 20 FPS on average. I would already say DLSS is needed for this title, but it's even more necessary if you're trying this. CS2 scaled well to 1440p, keeping over 90 FPS on the same high settings. Well worth the extra pixels if you're willing to turn down a couple of settings to raise up those 1%. 4K still proves to be difficult for this card at high settings, producing a 46 FPS average. Now we're reaching the territory of needing to turn down settings as low as FPS hoarders do, while still not getting a whole lot of frames for it. F124 kept up similarly with the rest of the games on here, as 1440p produced decent results on the same test, although settings had to be dropped to medium to keep it above 60. I wish 4K would have held up similarly with the settings turned down, but bumping the settings to the lowest couldn't crack 60 frames even if it wanted to. Definitely stick to 1080p if you like your graphics, 1440 if you prefer resolution. Okay, maybe I'll keep a few of these games at 1080p. It's not like the average person will notice anyways from the TVs on the wall across the room, whenever I get around to mounting it. Still, an under $600 system running this well is pretty impressive when people are spending that much on a graphics card alone and complaining about their frame rates. I can't believe I'm about to say this about a PC with an RTX 3050 in it, but I think this system is money well spent. I can't think of a single thing I would change about it. Unless you gave me a much larger budget, in which case I'd figure out a way to fit a 5090 in here, thermals be damned. If there's one thing I've really learned from this build though, it's that you really don't need a whole lot to make a sleeper build that can play a good chunk of today's games while tricking everybody into thinking it doesn't even work. Let me know what you thought about this build, what changes you might make, and what you'd like to see from me next. Until then, may your GPU give you all the frames you need, and have a good one.